Hi everyone, Muneeb here, co-founder of Saks, and today I'm going to talk about smart contracts for Bitcoin. I think in general, we're all excited about crypto because it makes money programmable. You're basically limited by your own imagination in terms of what you can do, but we're kind of like at the infrastructure phase right now, where there are several choices available, and people and developers are trying to figure out where they want to build. I would generally categorize things or the crypto industry into three categories right now. One is Bitcoin, which is better known as a store of value, as almost like the stable base layer, and then there is Ethereum that has smart contracts and is the current kind of like default place for people to go and build applications and smart contracts and so on. And then there is a category of these quote unquote next generation protocols that are trying to improve smart contracts in certain ways, but really building kind of like their own separate ecosystems. And we don't know right now, like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, which out of these categories would actually end up being the center of gravity. Or maybe we are heading towards a multi-chain world. Like I think what we know right now is that there are a ton of experiments happening, and that's generally a healthy thing for the ecosystem, because different design choices can get tested out, and people can see what the differences are and so on. So Stacks is actually in the camp which is rather unique in the crypto industry, because instead of trying to do things on top of Ethereum or starting a separate ecosystem, we are more in the Bitcoin camp. So our thesis is that the simple base layer of Bitcoin and the security of Bitcoin is a competitive advantage, and it's a very elegant design because you can bring smart contracts as a separate layer to Bitcoin itself. And Bitcoin, as we all know, is by far the largest network, has the most amount of crypto capital. So that design tends to make a lot of sense if you could just enable smart contracts around Bitcoin. And interestingly, a lot of people think that for some reason that's not possible, right? Because Bitcoin has this image of, it is very limited in functionality, it doesn't change. And I think there is a misconception in the market right now that you cannot add functionality to Bitcoin, you cannot bring smart contracts to Bitcoin. Because yes, you can't really do that at the base layer, but that's almost by design. You don't want to mess with the base layer. You want to keep the base layer stable, immutable, and then you want to bring additional functionality as separate layers that can be more experimental, that can bring these additional features without kind of like messing with the security of the base layer. And that's the design that Stacks explores. And in this talk, I'll walk through some of our design decisions, some of the interesting things developers are kind of like building on top, and so on. So first of all, I think a little kind of like history connection here, that this design of sharing the compute power of Bitcoin and bringing new use cases to Bitcoin by figuring out ways to kind of like connect to Bitcoin and actually sharing that secure base goes all the way back to 2010 and to Satoshi Nakamoto. Right. So when back in the day, when there were ideas around how to start things like decentralized domain names or other types of use cases around Bitcoin, and where early concepts like merge mining and stuff were born, this was kind of like the holy grail that was pointed out. Because and I think it makes a lot of sense, because imagine like completely separate, disconnected blockchain systems. They don't have incentive alignment. Right. But if you have a shared base, if you are all kind of like sharing your security with Bitcoin, then there is less competition between those chains, because Stacks, for example, does not compete with Bitcoin to be a reserve currency or to be a store of value. Stacks is actually dependent on the existence of Bitcoin, and Stacks is simply gas for smart contracts. So it adds a layer of functionality without trying to compete with Bitcoin, and there's strong kind of like incentive alignment between the two. And as I mentioned, that Bitcoin is by far the largest network. It's actually proven out over the last 10 plus years to be the best form of sovereign money, because for people who are kind of like new to crypto, there have been many attempts to try and change Bitcoin in several ways, or there have been several attacks on the Bitcoin network. And the thing where Bitcoin really shines is the level of decentralization. Like Satoshi Nakamoto basically disappeared. There are no kind of like, founders of the project. There is no kind of like real single company behind it. It's a truly decentralized network that maximizes for independent verification, meaning that anyone can start a node, anyone can sync up to the network and independently verify what is the correct history of the blockchain. And that's an extremely important property to have that can be then extended to smart contracts and other types of use cases. And obviously, Bitcoin has such a large amount of crypto capital, like close to like $1 trillion, depends on the crypto markets that the price goes up and down. But that's by far the largest amount of crypto capital. So can we actually make the Bitcoin capital directly useful in smart contracts? Because most of the capital remains passive. Yes, there is some amount of Bitcoin that has been wrapped and issued on Ethereum, but that's like roughly in the 1% range. Like most of the capital still remains as Bitcoin. And I think to make it directly useful in smart contracts, you would kind of like need to bring smart contracts to the base layer so that most of Bitcoin can actually stay on the base layer itself, yet you can actually deploy it in different smart contracts and so on. So this is what Stacks does. Think of that as a L1 blockchain that connects to Bitcoin. It has a unique consensus mechanism where leader election actually happens on the Bitcoin side, and Stacks is that additional L1 that connects to Bitcoin, and thousands of transactions on the Stack side would settle on Bitcoin as a single hash. So it's a very scalable and energy-friendly way of bringing new functionality to Bitcoin and benefiting from the security of Bitcoin. So in terms of the design choices that we made, so the first big one was trying to build in the broader Bitcoin ecosystem instead of starting a separate, disconnected blockchain and ecosystem. And that has a lot of benefits because the smart contracts deployed on the Stack side, they have automatic visibility into Bitcoin transactions. So you could just do a transaction on the Bitcoin side, and that can actually trigger logic in a smart contract, which is very powerful. And interestingly, because Stacks understands Bitcoin transactions, you can even define ownership of assets by pure Bitcoin transactions as well. So if there are people who are kind of like fans of Bitcoin, they can actually interact with smart contracts just by doing Bitcoin transactions, and that is something that is very powerful. And something that's kind of like in the R&D phase for us right now is how to enable the smart contracts on the Stack side to directly write to Bitcoin. There's some limited functionality that is online where there are certain contracts where logic on the Stack side is already kind of like triggering Bitcoin transactions, but we want to generalize that feature more for developers, and that will be immensely powerful because that means that smart contracts can remain in the independent layer, but you can actually directly write logic on the Bitcoin side and trigger transactions on the Bitcoin side as well. So the Stacks blockchain launched in January of this year, so it's been around 4 or 5 months. And interestingly, like people are already doing all sorts of interesting things. There are like close to 100 different smart contracts that have been published on the blockchain. The most popular one is called the PUX contract, where people lock up their capital and they earn Bitcoin. And the earning rate is around 10% approximately right now. And these are real Bitcoin transactions. So when you're locking up capital and you're earning Bitcoin, you receive Bitcoin in a Bitcoin wallet as a Bitcoin transaction. And that's for a lot of people is a big aha moment for them when they actually receive the Bitcoin and they see the power of kind of like decentralized finance directly around the Bitcoin blockchain. And for these smart contracts, so the project was started by a bunch of computer scientists from Princeton University, including myself. And we really think that the security of the smart contract language is extremely important here. So it's not just the design around Bitcoin and trying to unleash the power of Bitcoin, but we want to do that in as secure manner as possible. And the programming language that we designed is Clarity, that is a decidable language. So you can actually tell before you execute the smart contract what this program can do and what this program cannot do. which is almost like night and day in terms of security of smart contracts. And other blockchain systems like Algorand has also adopted the Clarity language, and which we're very excited about. So in the 4 months since the launch of Stacks, we are seeing people do all sorts of things. They're actually building NFTs for Bitcoin, or even NFTs that can earn Bitcoin itself, because because Stacks as an asset has this property that you can lock it up and actually earn Bitcoin. So people are trying to remix that in all sorts of interesting ways. People are building liquidity protocols, also types of like stable assets, and basically the kind of things that we have seen in the DeFi market, but this time kind of like bringing that functionality to the Bitcoin side with a fully expressive programming language. So you can actually do pretty much anything that you want to do. You're really limited by your own imagination. People are also trying to bring Bitcoin-derived assets to the Stacks chain as well. And if you want to take a look at some of these projects, like one example would be the Arcadico protocol. They just launched their testnet today, actually. So you can actually go and check out what they're building. Again, like the stablecoin that they have launched, the unique thing over there is that there's potential to actually earn Bitcoin through some of the protocols that they have built out. And I think that's really the unique thing, that once you're building around Bitcoin, you don't only benefit from the security of Bitcoin, but you can actually design DeFi protocols where earning Bitcoin is kind of like a core feature of some of these protocols. Yes, so I think in short, like Stacks is smart contracts for Bitcoin. It's a truly decentralized system. There's so many independent entities and app developers that are working in it, and that's the route that we took almost by design. Stacks was the first crypto asset that was distributed to the general public through a SEC qualified offering, and it went through a decentralization process where there are so many different entities and developers and ecosystem players, and there's kind of like no single company that's behind it. We really believe in Bitcoin. We think that the $1 trillion of Bitcoin capital could be really powerful once it gets deployed in smart contracts for Bitcoin directly. If you want to learn more, you should go to stacks.co, or you can find me on Twitter. My handle is @Muneeb. Thank you so much.